Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. And yesterday I complained that it was a quiet news day. It's flipped 180 degrees. It is the exact opposite today. We have a hell of a lot to talk about. A few names have been linked with Celtic Football Club in regards to potential signings this summer. Some more realistic than others. Nonetheless, it's still news, it's still gossip, and I'm here to give my opinions on it all as always. Do I think there's legs that grow from these stories, or do I think that it's nonsense? It's time to determine that today. Let's get into this edition of Celtic Transfer Talk. I completely forgot that I had a designated intro for this series. It's back. Finally, it's been a while. Ladies and gents, hello, like and subscribe if you haven't already. As I said, we have a hell of a lot to cover today, so I want to try and fly through things as quickly as possible. So apologies if certain stories aren't in as much depth as I would usually go to, but we'd be here all day if I don't try and fly through it. So hit those buttons below and let's get right into this. So Celtic have been linked with some amount of goalkeepers in this transfer window. Quite frankly, I'm fed up with it. I'm quite bored already. Every goalkeeper available over the continent seems to be a target for Celtic this transfer window, and that doesn't change this morning with the links that grow from Newcastle United. This was an article that came out from the Northern Echo down in the Newcastle area over the past 24 hours that Celtic are lining up a summer move for Newcastle United's Martin Dubravka. The article by Scott Wilson goes on to say that Celtic are lining up a summer move for Dubravka, with Newcastle willing to allow the keeper to leave. Newcastle have begun their overhaul of the goalkeeping department. Of course, Loris Karius being released and Burnley's James Trafford on the way. So the last year of a contract for Mr. Dubravka means that he is free to leave reportedly this summer. Somebody who has played an awful lot for Newcastle. He's been there for a number of years now. He of course had a short loan stint as well with Manchester United a couple of years ago, but his time at Newcastle at the age of 35 is up, which means naturally Celtic have been linked with the player. Can I just get out here straight away? I don't think there's much in this. I just don't see it. I don't at all. I don't think anything from the Martin Dubravka story makes sense. The only thing that makes sense for Martin Dubravka to become a Celtic player this summer and to be Celtic's new number one keeper is the fact that he would cost less than £1 million. With a year left on his deal at the age of 35 and with the door open for him to leave at St James's Park, I don't see Newcastle demanding much of a fee. And that, of course, would appeal to Celtic with the way that we like to recruit and keep things cheap. But at the age of 35 and after a really dodgy season in goals for Martin Dubravka, it just makes very little sense, and I don't think there's much to it at all. I think this is typically another one of these goalkeepers who are available in the window and have been linked with Celtic because it's easy to do so, and probably because, yeah, maybe Celtic have added him to a short list somewhere. Maybe he is on a list of goalkeepers and that's got out, but there's so many other keepers that we've been linked with in this window that just makes a hell of a lot more sense. And I'll say the same thing as I said about Asmir Begovic at the start of the transfer window. Why would we replace 36-year-old Joe Hart with 35-year-old Martin Dubravka? It adds no long-term vision for the club. It means that we're going to be in the same position again in a year or two's time where we need to look for yet another goalkeeper. Celtic should be trying to sign a keeper, and I'm pretty sure they will be looking for a goalkeeper that maybe holds this position for longer than a year or two at the twilight years of their career. And Martin Dubravka doesn't exactly have the performances to back up why he should be number one. So yes, Martin Dubravka has played 30 times for Newcastle over the course of the 2023-24 campaign, including 8 clean sheets amongst that, but most Newcastle fans will tell you, and if you watch the Premier League week in, week out, you'll be able to see it as well. Martin Dubravka has not had a strong season. Very mixed performances. A keeper who's capable of making big saves and good saves, but generally a really dodgy season. And I think Newcastle fans have been desperate for Nick Pope to get back and fit towards the end of that campaign because they just couldn't really take more of Dubravka, sometimes single-handedly blame for the dropping of points. He doesn't look like the goalkeeper he maybe was 5 or 6 years ago when he was in his late 20s, and that's natural, isn't it? As you get older, you do sort of dip in your performances. So nothing to me none of it makes sense, because it has been out on record that Martin Dubravka wants to be a number one. He wants to be starting games next season wherever he is. It shouldn't be at Celtic. I don't think there's an awful lot in this. I just think it's another name that's been thrown towards Celtic with the other 20,000 goalkeepers that have been thrown towards Celtic. I would be very shocked if he emerged as the number one for Celtic going into the 2024-25 campaign. And my final point on this before I move on to the next set of stories, which I think have a little bit more worth in them. I wasn't even going to talk about Dubravka today because I thought it was nonsense from the get-go. From the minute I saw it, I decided I'm not even going to talk about it in the channel. He won't be at Celtic next year. I decided to throw him into today's video because it is a story at the end of the day. It is out there, and also I wanted to give my opinion on it, my opinion of it being nonsense. But my final point is, I know a lot of people might be saying, oh Ryan, you said the same thing about Joe Hart. When Joe Hart was coming in at age 34 or whatever he was at the time, and he wasn't playing very well, you said it was a stupid decision, we shouldn't have went for him, and look how that turned out. I just want to reiterate this point, I've said it a million times, you can't bank on that. Every time a similar situation creeps up doesn't mean that lightning's going to strike twice. So maybe there is some people out there that would be happy with Dubravka being Celtic's number one next year. I wouldn't be, and I don't think many of us would be. And ultimately, I just think there's bugger all in it. But we'll watch if anything develops from it. The thing is, he won't be coming in to be a number two if he did, so that's what puts me off completely. But that story was out there today. The most exciting transfer story that has emerged in the past 24 hours is to do with a centre-back. Of course, Celtic need a centre-half partner for Cameron Carter-Vickers next season. It's one of the priorities on Celtic's shopping list. And quite an exciting report has emerged from Germany as to who that could maybe be. Another one that, of course, you just need to watch. See how it develops, because there's no guarantee that he'll even be available this summer. However, this was a very interesting post from Sky Sports Germany journalist Florian Plettenberg. You might be familiar with him in the past with some stories, or you might be familiar through Sky Sports with Florian Plettenberg, a very reliable journalist. He said that Celtic Glasgow, Celtic, of course, has a concrete interest in the 23-year-old centre-back Flavius Danilic. God, the pronunciation's probably terrible. His contract with Salernitana runs until 2026. Currently on loan at Red Bull Salzburg. They would like to keep him, but no decision has been made final yet. And Danilic is in the Austrian squad for the Euros. So this was one that really came out of nowhere over the past 24 hours. I heard nothing to do with Celtic looking at an Austrian centre-half. However, upon research this afternoon, I must admit, I like the look of him. 23 years of age, standing 6'2", Mr. Danilic is currently applying his trade to Italian side Salernitana, where he started last season and got a move there a couple of years ago for about €5.5 million. But he spent the second half of the last campaign out on loan to Red Bull Salzburg in the Austrian top flight. That loan move does have an option to buy, not an obligation to buy, an option to buy, which Red Bull Salzburg haven't made their mind up yet and have till the end of the month to decide if they want to trigger it. Now, of course, that doesn't mean he's definitely going to be a Salzburg player, doesn't mean he's definitely not going to be a Salzburg player. It comes down to the player himself. Even if they did try and trigger that option, he could knock Salzburg back if there's interest on the table and he wants to go elsewhere. Celtic could, hypothetically speaking, put a word in. They could put their interest out there, they could signal to the player they're interested, and maybe he'd be more interested in the move to come to Glasgow and play for us. However, of course, Red Bull Salzburg, a team in a very similar position to us right now, the top dogs in their respective country, constantly playing European football, and, you know, a decent side with money behind them, can offer good wages, etc., and offers a pathway to clubs in the top flight of Germany's league and the Bundesliga, as we've seen them many times in the past. An attractive move for a permanent deal to Salzburg, but the most important thing is the club have not made their decision yet. The big thing is, and I know I just called them the top dogs in their respective nation, I think that's because we've all got a little bit used to the success of Red Bull Salzburg over the last few years. They didn't win the Austrian Bundesliga last year. They finished second. Sturm Graz won the Austrian Bundesliga, which means the Champions League football is guaranteed for them, whereas Celtic have the advantage of having guaranteed Champions League football via being champions of Scotland. So slipping for a year, of course, and allowing Sturm Graz to win the league has put Celtic in an advantage here if the interest is strong and the interest is genuine. that might lure him to a move to Celtic rather than Salzburg should they trigger the option. Last season he played 12 times for Red Bull Salzburg following his move in the January transfer window. He got 3 assists in that time from the centre-half position, interestingly enough, but he looks good. He also spent time in the youth systems of both Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. So 2 of the biggest clubs, 2 of maybe the top 5 biggest clubs in world football. He spent time in their youth systems and currently valued at €6 million. He looks like a young talent. He looks like somebody I definitely have interest in seeing come to Celtic. I think the biggest selling point for me is the fact that this is a young lad at 23 years of age who's played in, not just only played with Real Madrid and Bayern Munich's youth systems, who's not only playing at a good level right now with Red Bull Salzburg and through the continent in Italy as well. He's got that experience, of course, but he's an Austrian international who's been selected for the Euros as well. Austria's got a good team. It's not easy to get into the Austrian national team. It's not easy to get into any national team. I always give a great deal of respect for established internationals. He's made 3 appearances for the Austrian national team thus far in his career, but has been selected on the plane for Euro 2024, which I think is a bit of a selling point to me, something that makes me more interested in the guy. So if he plays through the Euros, which remains to be seen, it's someone to keep an eye on when the tournament kicks off later this week, because there is potential that Celtic move in for this. As always, pinch of salt stuff when it comes to transfer rumours. I think there's legs in this one. I don't think it would be picked up on by Florian Plettenberg if it wasn't. It's something to be looked at seriously, so I do think there's something to kind of watch here and develop over the next few weeks, depending on what happens with the Salzburg situation. But despite I'd never heard of him before this morning, I'm not going to sit here and bum him up when I couldn't tell you how good a footballer he is. But off my initial research I do on every player when we get linked with them, I like this, and I would be certainly interested. And final story for today, I feel like this sort of story comes out every single year. We always get linked with somebody in the Scottish national team, and it's not only us that gets linked with them, it's always Celtic and Rangers, and it always comes from one of those Glasgow Live type locations. Just like today's, it comes from Bristol Live, who have linked Celtic with Bristol City striker Tommy Conway. The headline was saying that Celtic, Rangers and Wolves are on red alert as Bristol City prepare for a Tommy Conway sale. The article goes on to say that Tommy Conway might have played his last game for Bristol City. The club are open to listen to offers for the striker, with their patience having been worn thin over his unwillingness to sign a new contract. In that article it says Celtic and Rangers are both on the lookout, including a compensation fee. They're ready to move him on. Apparently only 1 year left on his deal. Of course, part of the Scottish national team this summer in the Euros. He was selected in the squad. Scored 12 goals last season across 43 games in the English Championship and FA Cup. It's somebody who I've only came on to realise existed in the past few months as he's been selected for Scotland, to be quite honest. I'd never really heard much about him beforehand. He's been at Bristol City his whole career, basically, and now Celtic and both Rangers linked with him. I'll say the same as what I said about Dubravka. I wouldn't look into this one too much, and I know that people might automatically be interested and be happy with this because, well, he's a Scottish international at the end of the day, but this sort of story comes round every year when there's somebody that's on the move from the national team that's a bit better than maybe the dross that is surrounding the team. When there's somebody semi-decent and they're on the move, it's always Celtic and Rangers. Celtic and Rangers. It's like they like to stir up this competition. The agent puts the feelers out to see if they can get something going. I don't think there's much to this. Unlike the last story, which I think actually has legs to it and could go somewhere, I don't imagine to see Tommy Conway's name coming up with Celtic much more in this window. So I would remain grounded on that one. However, you might have seen it and the story is out there. So that does it for today. You're up to date. There was an update on Matt O'Reilly as well. He's been linked now with Roma in Italy, but still waiting for anything more severe with Matt O'Reilly to say that he's actually off or he's got his move. So as soon as more comes out and something that has substance to it is there, we will talk about it. But for now, not really too much. That's basically it. You're up to date for today. I think a couple of stories that you could throw away in my opinion, and then the one about Flavius Stanulic, just keep an eye out. But until next time, make sure to hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you all later.